So, for today's video, we're going to be doing Exposure by Wilfred Owen. A wonderful poem written about how the weather was one of the enemies of the soldiers, more so than the Germans in the trenches in World War I. He wrote this poem not long before he was killed in battle. So it's interesting that we've actually got a World War I poet who was there. As normal, we're doing form and language in pink and the structure in yellow. So reading through the start of the poem, we start with "Our brains ache," immediately putting the focus onto the soldiers. We're not focusing on the fighting, we're not focusing on these brave and daring charges, we're focusing straight away on the soldiers. So if you think back to when we did Charge the Light Brigade, we started with half a league, half a league, half a league onwards, and we talk about the bravery straight away, the galloping of the horse, but we're not focusing on the soldiers themselves. On this one, "Our brains ache," we're starting straight away with the soldiers. So, "Our brains ache" shows us straight away that it is a painful, shared experience. In the merciless iced east winds that knife us. So we have two things to note about this. We have the personification of nature here. And then looking further on at the end of the lines, and if you look at the end of this line and the next few lines, we have the ellipses. Now we have the ellipses here that hint that he's waiting for something. So that structural feature at the end of each of those three lines that have the ellipses make us feel as though he is waiting for something. But it never does. And that's why we have an ellipsis rather than a dash, is because that thing never does happen. So if we've got this idea, we've got this group of men waiting for something for it to never happen, this is the theme or the idea of boredom. And actually, if you think about the fighting in World War I, the biggest part of the fighting, the most important part of the fighting, was the in-between parts. Remember, a battle could sometimes last as little as 5 or 6 minutes. There's another 23 and nearly 24 hours in a day. Carrying on then, wearied we keep awake because the night is still. Low drooping flares confuse our memory of the salient. Worried by silent sentries whisper, curious, nervous. And we have these words introduced here. There's lots of different emotions introduced, where we have confusion, we have worry, we have curiosity, we have nervousness, and linking those together, we have these emotions make it seem more human. And we have this ending of, but nothing happens. And that's short and simple sentence at the end there. That half line, so that short and simple half line emphasizes the boredom and tension. Moving on to the next stanza. Watching, we hear the mad gusts tugging on the wire, like twitching agonies of men among its brambles. So we've got this lovely simile here I say lovely, twitching agonies, I don't know if I'd describe that as lovely. But we have the twitching agonies and this simile of the brambles of barbed wire. So the brambles remind us of the pain caused by nature. And that is a simile. Northward, incessantly, the flickering gunnery rumbles. We've got this assonance, this alliteration, and this onomatopoeia throughout, where we have, no, there's no alliteration, my apologies, assonance and onomatopoeia that create a vivid oral description. The flickering gunnery rumbles, so we have assonance, and onomatopoeia, create, and rather than say it as I did last time, I'm going to say create a vivid soundscape. Moving on then, far off like a dull rumour of some other war. That is a biblical reference. We have the rumour of some other war. And we end with this rhetorical question, what are we doing here? He's asking what's the point of it all? The poignant misery is the next line, and a really beautiful line. The poignant misery of dawn begins to grow. We only know war lasts, rain soaks, and clouds sag stormy. On that second line, there's a nice triple. We've got a nice tricolon, if you want to be clever. Where war lasts, rain soaks, and clouds sag. So we have a tricolon. Tricolon is the posh way of saying triple. The dawn massing in the east her melancholy army. So we have dawn personified. Normally, dawn, I would class this as ironic because dawn normally brings hope. Think about how many times you've been told, don't worry, tomorrow's another day. So here we have the personification, in this case, of dawn bringing a melancholy army with her, an army of sadness, attacks once more in the ranks on shivering ranks of grey. So this description matches the trenches, but nothing happens, and we have the repetition of that line again. Sudden successive flights of bullets streak the silence, less deadly than the air that shudders black with snow, with sidelong flowing flakes that flock, pause and renew. We watch them wandering up and down the wind's nonchalance, but nothing happens. So looking at that first line again, the sudden successive flights of bullets streak the silence. Hopefully you're picking up on the S sound in there. And as you should know, the repetition of the S sound is sibilance. So the sibilance here mimics the sound. Carrying on then, the sibilance here in this line, mimicking the sound of the bullets flying past, less deathly than the air that shudders black with snow. So we were talking about that black with snow and that symbolization of purity. So here we would have an example of the juxtaposition of black snow with our expectation. The fact that it's black symbolizes death. Obviously in war poetry there's going to be a lot of this. There's going to be a lot of death being referenced as we move along. We have a really nice section lower down with the flowing flakes that flock, with the alliteration of flowing flakes and flock. That sound, that F sound, is like the woomph of the snow, so it emphasises, so the alliteration, to make that clear for you, emphasises the relentlessness or the relentless nature of the snow. We watch them wandering up and down the wind's nonchalance, but nothing happens. Looking down at that final stanza then on this page before we turn over, the pale flakes with fingering stealth come feeling for our faces. We cringe in halls, back on forgotten dreams, and stare, snow-dazed, deep into the grassier ditches, so we drowse, sun-dozed, littered with blossoms trickling where the blackbird fusses. Is it that we are dying? So a nice little question introduced there at the end. So going back to the start of this, we have the personification. And in that personification, it makes it seem like the snow is malicious. Thinking if something is malicious, it means it's evil or it's cruel, it's seeking out negativity. We cringe in holes back on forgotten dreams and stare, snow-dazed, and then look at how we have snow-dazed at the end of this line, and then the next line is sun-dozed. So we have this repetition here. And the repetition here and that half rhyme links the situation. So the half rhyme links their present situation with their past. And then finishing this page off, is it that we are dying? Another question, possibly answering the first question further up with that, what are we doing here? Is it that we are dying? Well, we can have a look, we can link these two ideas together, is that their purpose here is to die. So possibly that their purpose is to be here to die. So carrying on with the second half of the poem, slowly our ghosts drag home. So here we have the assonance of the long O sounds. We have slowly our ghosts drag home with that tricolon at the start, makes the imagined journey sound long and painful. We've got towards the end as well, glozed as well. An archaic form of glazed. With crusted dark red jewels. So with the fires here, they offer them absolutely no warmth. They look like jewels which are precious but cold. Crickets jingle there. For hours, the innocent mice rejoice. The house is theirs. Shutters and doors all closed. On us, the doors are closed. So we have in the middle there a pause. We have it above as well, where we have two caesurae. Now the caesura here, the one that I'm really going to focus on, that one suggests it creates a division in the line. In fact, it does in both. So for hours, the innocent mice rejoice. The house is theirs. Shutters and doors all closed. On us, the doors are closed. So the two breaks in the middle reflect how the men are shut out from their homes. And we turn back to our dying. It's like they've almost forgotten about it. Like, oh, whoops, forgot we were supposed to be dying. Carrying on then, we get the since we believe not otherwise can kind fires burn, nor ever suns smile true on child or field or fruit. So we have this suggestion here that they are sacrificing themselves. And to sacrifice yourself for a greater cause was seen as martyrs. So they were seen as martyrs for their cause. But they're sacrificing themselves, they're martyrs because they want life to be preserved. For God's invincible spring, our love is made afraid. Therefore, not loath, we lie out here. Therefore, we're born. And we have here this idea of the repetition. All closed, therefore, therefore. So we have the all closed and closed, the therefore and the therefore. And the repetitions here emphasizes the idea that here everything's closed to them, they're shut out. And here they're just lying there. And that they were born for their purpose, and their purpose was to die. And then for this final line, for the love of God seems dying, could mean that their love of God is dying, or they feel that God's love for them. So they could either feel abandoned, or be abandoning God. Tonight this frost will fasten on this mud and us, shrivelling many hands and puckering foreheads crisp. So we have this vivid imagery here. It shows what the cold does to the bodies. Carrying on, we have all their eyes are ice, doing the same thing. But we also have this idea, not only does it link to this vivid imagery, but it also is this wonderful metaphor referring to the eyes of the living and the dead. It shows how they've been overpowered by nature. So this metaphor how they've been overpowered by nature. And then this final stanza ending the same way that the first one ended. It reflects that monotony of the trenches, that boredom, and also this final one showing us that not even death changes anything. So, looking at our themes box, so 3 themes to really think about today. So the theme of suffering, the physical and the emotional pain, we have the boredom, that the men are frustrated. They've come to fight and instead they're just sitting there waiting, feeling this final theme of hopelessness. That they're helpless against the power of nature. Going back onto the previous page to get the notes about comparison, the poems that I'd use to compare with this one would be looking on that theme of reality of war. I would want to see Charge of the Light Brigade, which I've abbreviated there for the sake of today, and the obvious one of Bayonet Charge. Looking for the second set of ideas, you could look at Storm on the Island, focusing on the power of nature. And if you really wanted to stretch it a bit, you could talk about the absence of hope. And that would be in the poem London.